Welcome to Planetary Gig Talk, Tales of Music and Magic. I'm your host, Jefferson Glassy, Chief Spiritual Dude of the Planetary Gig Society, whose mission is creating unity through music, or as I like to say, making connections through music with the intention of bringing peace. And I am here today in Studio One at the worldwide headquarters of the Planetary Gig Society, and our guest is 3,000 miles away, and I'm so very happy and pleased now have the opportunity to talk with great musician, educator, Ms. Ariane Cap. Hi, Ari. How are you doing?
Hello, I'm doing very well. It's great to connect with.
Yeah, thanks very much. We haven't really met, but we share, common friends and experiences through Victor Wooten's camps, and I'm sure a number of people, and Dave Dickens was nice enough to introduce us. He said he thought you would be a great person to talk with, and I agree, and I'm so happy that you've taken the time to be able to do this today.
It's my pleasure, and I'm always amazed whenever I meet quote-unquote campers, which of course we know what we mean by that, Victor Wooten camps, that we have attended. There's always a certain amount of kinship and camaraderie that it almost feels like you already know that person. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, truth. That's true. So I'd like to ask a little bit about, your own life in music, when music may have come into your life. Did you, were your parents musical? Was there music in the house a lot? Did they play? When did you start? Did you start with the piano lessons like a lot of people? You did this or that, and kind of how did you end up with the bass? What was your trajectory of music? What do you kind of remember, or how would you describe that?
So my story may be a little bit of an untypical one for a bass player. I started out as a classical musician very early, with various early childhood education and playing piano. And my brother played piano. My mom was very patient and encouraged me and was sitting next to me, practicing and that sort of thing. And my grandfather was a conductor, and he used to give me tapes of several Bach Brandenburg concertos and that sort of thing. So it was all classical music. And maybe it would be correct to say music that had drums in them, or electric bass for that matter, was, a little bit looked down on. It wasn't played at home. It wasn't talked about. It wasn't really understood or appreciated. And so I really grew up in this sort of classical bubble, but at the same time, I had the classical education, which to this day informs my way of teaching and understanding of music in a very positive way. And then when I was 18, definitely the love affair with, pop, rock, jazz, funk started in my late teens. But I went to America when I was 18, and I was an au pair girl. And I fell in love with the street musicians on Harvard Square. And, it was the days of Tracy Chapman. And,
Right.
I was just hanging out on Harvard Square and just listening to those musicians. And then people would give me a guitar. And because I had all this strong music theory background, I could just pick the thing up and understand, okay, this is a scale. This is how this works. Okay. And, figure out the notes and figure out the grips. And I was jamming along pretty quickly. And
can I have some of that? Can I get some of that? Can I get some of that just ability to pick it up and understand it?
Yes, I'm absolutely certain that that's learnable. Because what it was for me, like, it felt like I'm connecting the dots between the theory I knew, which informed me about chords and which informed me about scales and just tonal material. And this is kind of relevant. When I came back from that year in America, I knew I wanted to play in a band. Now I had the bug. Now I'm like, listening to jazz, funk, pop, really like doing a lot of catch up, it felt like. And so I joined a band, and at first as a guitar player and keyboard player. And soon we lost our bass player, and we needed a new bass player, couldn't find somebody. So at some point, somebody suggested, why don't you go and get a bass? Because you already know guitar. You're going to pick it up. And we had gigs on the books, so we really needed one. And I went out, I did exactly that. I went, I got a bass. And 2 weeks later, I was playing my first gig. And the way I was understanding it was the guitar player going poke here, and poke here. And at that point, I just had to learn the songs, right? And they opened up this whole new way of learning music, just not by knowing theory and reading something from a chart, but by just going by these fretboard patterns, and there's an immediate logic behind it, especially if you have a theory background. So I picked it up really easily because of that. And, but it was still a different way of learning, because up to that point, everything was just read down the dots on paper. And again, there was a lot of light bulbs that went off for me in my head about the way you can learn and the way you can approach music. And I played my first gig 2 weeks after that first rehearsal, with poke here, and haven't looked back since. But I started kind of late on the bass. I was in my early 20s.
But before that, your whole upbringing musically from age, 5 or 6 or 8?
Yeah, somewhere there. Yeah.
To 18 was classical. You
classical
played
training. You weren't allowed to color outside of the lines. You weren't. I was always trying to make things up. I was hearing things. I wanted to play what my brother was playing, and when he was practicing something, he's like 6 years older than me and a very good player. And I would pick up things that he was playing and go to the piano and poke it out. And they would start forbidding me that I do that. They would say, no, we have to make sure that she learns how to read, and sort of close her ears. She's not supposed to hear. And I mean, if I look back at, my teaching, especially working with kids, if there's a kid that spontaneously picks up things, I want to nurture that. I want to, wow, you got great ears. Let's try this. Let me show you that,
right.
But they sort of completely turned off that faucet. And it's like, no, we have to make sure she learns to read. So let's not have her play anything that her brother is playing, And also the classical, I had to go through this book, which sounded horrible for about a year. The Teufelsschule, I remember it like to this day, was this orange book with the big black letters. And unless you had that under your belt, you weren't allowed to play, music, like nice sounding pieces. Okay, because let's be frank, this stuff sounded horrible. It was all about, fingerings and independence, and they gave you this contraption that went over my head where you couldn't see the keys, so I had to feel the keys, and it was just torture. But what it I don't think this is right either. I don't think you have to have perfect technique before you can have fun playing music. Quite frankly, I don't agree with that at all. But it did show me the importance of good technique, and it really helped me as a teacher to really be strong on laying a good technique foundation with all my students, And some of that doesn't really sound like music because we're doing permutation exercises or pivot permutations or mirror permutations or whatever, string crossing exercises. They don't sound great, but you can make exercises out of them that can, sound like music. And you can, what's so great about these exercises is that you get better quick, and you have an immediate success trail. You can, but today I did it at tempo, 80. Until next week, I'm going to try to get it till 80, 82, and then there's different exercises with different intentions. You can practice some things for speed, you can practice some things for accuracy, for phrasing, for a variety of different things. But I think, the classical was a good reminder of how great good technique is, because you don't fight with the instrument. You just feel more comfortable. And so good technique, good formal technique is great. And the other thing that it drove home to me is just how useful theory is, to connect the dots, to understand songs, and especially on an instrument like the bass, where you you improvise, where even if you're playing a bass line, there are little fills, little touches of your own that you can give, serving the song, of course, but you can make it your own fairly quickly if you understand theory, if you understand how the fretboard shapes connect to the theory behind it. Then this whole world opens up of palettes and colors and possibilities that you can use.
Well, I'm trying to learn that, so it's good to hear that it's learnable, and it's
Absolutely
good to be on the path that I'm trying to identify all those patterns and that sort of thing. But so when you started playing bass, and now you've been playing professionally for quite some time, what's the difference? I mean, you've got the background, you've got the technique, you've got the theory. What is it that really opens up? How do you feel when you're playing the bass and you're just, rocking out and that sort of thing? What's the different perspective that opens up for you then?
So I've thought about this so much. Where does this, when you are in this state where music just flows through you, where does this come from, right? And so I've done a lot of research in terms of how we learn, and just observing my students and myself. I break down the way we learn into 5 different channels, if you will. And some of your listeners, or you may have heard about these learning channels. They're visual learners and they're auditory learners, and this was popular, I believe, in the 80s or 90s or something around that time. And they would the visual learners, they had to learn everything by looking at it, and the auditory people had to not look at the blackboard and all that sort of thing. That's not how this works, in my view. What I'm talking about is we have different learning channels, and we can give attention to each learning channel so that our learning is not so, hit or miss. But so we are really conscious and intentional about what we learn. So what I mean is we have a visual channel. And if you think you play guitar, so you can see where the dots are on the guitar. You can see your fingers move on the fretboard. Maybe you can see the chart in your mind's eye, right? And you can consciously train that channel. Which I think is a good idea. And if you sit down for one practice session and you really focus on that channel, you do yourself a great favor, right? It doesn't have to be hours on end, but maybe you do an exercise and for 5 minutes you practice it with the visual channel. Then, obviously, we're doing music. So the auditory channel, the ears, what we're hearing, right? Maybe it's what you're hearing inside. Maybe it's what you're hearing as you play. Very important channel. Ear training is a big topic for musicians. Then we have the kinesthetic channel, which is the feeling. So you learn a lot of things by rote. You learn scales, you learn grips, you learn chords. That's the kinesthetic channel. And obviously we can train that one very intentionally. We can, play the same piece you just played, listening and looking at the chart and that sort of thing, and just focus in, zoom in on what is it my fingers are doing, right?
So that's is that the muscle memory?
Yes, muscle memory, absolutely. Yeah. This is great. It's very interesting because that channel is very fast. It can, you can train yourself to do things very fast just by doing things by rote, muscle memory. And I'm usually not a big fan of rote learning, because I think if we are focused on certain items and how we learn, we can, cut a lot of time out of just mindless repetition. But the muscle memory likes to do things quite a bit. And so that's the kinesthetic channel. But then there's also some sort of a conceptual channel,
Photoconceptual?
Like music theory, for example, or like knowing the notes on the fretboard. For example, when you improvise, you know that a third on the downbeat or a fifth on the downbeat sounds really nice. And you know that because, well, you've heard it and you can hear it in your mind, but you also have the theory concept that tells you it's a chord tone, so it's going to sound good, right? For example. So the conceptual knowing, knowing where the grips are, knowing where on the fretboard we are. It's a useful channel. It can also be a little bit of a slow channel, because we have to think about where are the note names, where are we, that sort of thing. But it's a very useful channel to make sense of things. So as you're learning a song, as you're learning to improvise or walk a bass line or something like that, it's tremendously helpful to know the theoretical background behind it. And then there's this fifth channel, this really interesting one that, we're trying to sort of pinpoint where, when we really feel connected with the instrument, and you don't have to have played for years on end. And you shared with me you haven't been playing very long, but I would venture to guess you've had moments where you just really felt the music was flowing and you forgot about yourself and you forgot, right?
Yep.
So
it's amazing.
It's incredible, and you can. So this channel, how can we, open that channel up? And I believe that all these other four channels help open that pathway, help open that gateway, and it contains maybe also, or is informed also by the music we listen to, the whatever it is that's in our background. So when we're not consciously thinking about it, that's sort of the stuff that comes bubbling up. And I am certain that it's the stuff we practice, If we practice a certain scale by rote, and I see that with my students every day. I mean, we do a lot of improvising in modes and those sort of things. And I show them a lot of technique exercises to practice a scale, for example. And, we'll do interval studies and that sort of thing. And first we do the technique and the interval studies. And then, okay, now go and improvise. And all of a sudden, these things they just practice start bubbling up. So I think it's a mixture of what we know, what we practice, how open we are, how comfortable we are in the moment with the people we're playing, perhaps how well we can hear ourselves. Sound, I believe, is a big part of it. I know for myself, if I can't hear myself, or I'm for whatever reason not comfortable, with the situation, then it's much harder to open up that channel, right? And that's sort of how I think about it. And I always try to, in my lessons, hit it on each of them at least in some way.
And that last one is the one we were talking briefly before. It's kind of what Victor's trying to get at the spirit camp. How do you open up that channel, and I mean, that's a remarkable camp with the meditation and the nature sits and the different things. Here, play like a child for a few minutes. Oh, okay.
Yeah. And even, I mean, if I'm thinking camp, I'm thinking John Shop, right? Like the food you eat. It just does something to
right.
You know what I mean? It just the love with which it's prepared and presented, and then the nature setting. You are in this amazingly beautiful place with, animals and, different sounds, like we're not in our normal urban environment. It opens up the channels, right?
Yeah, the input and the output and the setting. So you've obviously thought about these things a lot, and you've been playing all your life. And so how would you, I mean, there's something going on there with music. There's something going on, some sort of power. I don't know if it's possible to describe it, but how have you seen or felt music have an influence on you, on people students, other people, audiences, just kind of in general? What is going on with that power of music from your perspective?
Well, there's so much talk these days about negative interaction between, male, female, or races or whatnot. And I have to say, in my professional as well as personal life, because as a musician, you can't really distinguish that. I've had so many positive experiences. And there's always some bad apple that rains on your parade, that's for sure. But the overwhelming majority of experiences has been positive. And I see when musicians come together, of course, there's a business component, and business can sometimes be brutal, but I have seen you get together with musicians, and there is this common language, this common goal, this, you just want to create something good and beautiful and have fun at it. And, and there is also this aspect when you make music, and I know this from my students a lot, there is fear and I should have, could have, and fear of lost time, and why am I not that good? And is there even hope? And the talent, and these negative voices, right?
Yep, yep,
You're
yep.
not, but I know that every single musician I've talked to, all the way up to, the likes of Victor Wooten and such, they get nervous, they're insecure, they're not sure, you know. So it's in a way we're simmering in this self-doubt and fear, and not only, it's not always that, but it sometimes rears its ugly head. But we're all in this together.
Right.
Maybe we're sitting there and thinking, oh, it's only me having these dark thoughts, But I don't believe that, because whenever I bring it up, people go, oh, me too, I know exactly what you're talking about. So I mean, I just see the connecting power of music, and deep down, I think everybody just wants to live their good lives. And
Right.
there's so much negativity out there these days. I just deeply believe that people deep down in their core are good people.
Yes.
They don't want to harm. They don't want to cause any ruckus. We just get insecure sometimes. We get confused. We get, stirred up. There's people, having sinister goals maybe sometimes, and it's then hard to see clearly. But I know that whenever I meet, like when I said earlier, whenever you meet a camper, there's this immediate kinship there. There's somebody who wants to better themselves, who wants to practice their best, who wants to play, who has a trajectory and goal in life that has to do with self-improvement at some place, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because learning music takes discipline. It takes, it's not always just fun. It's fun a lot of times, but if you really want to break through to the next level, there's certain things you have to do. And it's great to be encouraged and be around people who want the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So there certainly is something there. I've just been impacted a lot, by the book, The Music Lesson Victor wrote, by his approach, by meeting other people, and so many musicians. One of my guitar teacher, who was the first interview I've ever did, he said, well, music, when you're playing music, it's kind of a racist free zone, and there is so much camaraderie, and it doesn't matter whether you're black or white or a woman or whatever you are. I mean, there may be some tinges of that in some aspects, but it's so universal and common. I have another friend who says, man, I just really all I want to do is play music with my friends.
Right.
So there's that bird clock, which has become a feature of Planetary Gig Talk.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Cuckoo clock.
So you put a lot of effort into, your own music, into teaching others, and all that makes a huge difference. Do you have thoughts about what are there things that you think would be helpful for people to think about, or to different perspectives that folks might have, musicians and others, to help get this power of music maybe bubbling up more around the world, so that we can, let people just be that beautiful, wonderful self that they are, and be fulfilled in that, and not have to go through all these insecurities and this craziness.
I think there is a very needless and unfortunate obsession these days with making music almost like a competition. And, it's when you see comments online sometimes, or, shows like America's Got Talent, it's always about rating who's the best, the fastest, the most amazing, you make you leap out of your seat, And I leap out of my seat every day when my students do something that's amazing to them, And what I connect with there is their particular individual journey. And I don't see why a journey that maybe on a broad scale isn't as masterful or whatever, that's what draws me to music, that there's a person who's looking to express themselves in their unique way. And that to me has valid. It has a lot of value and inspiration. And I'm thinking, if you open your ears to that, I mean, of course, there are, amazing artists that inspire us and all of that. But I rather see that as a guiding light, and not because a lot of students go, oh, I can never sound like fill in your favorite hero, so I'm going to quit. It doesn't have any validity and I'm just wasting my time, And I just want to say, no way. What you are doing there and in your microcosm, maybe it's not the world stage, but in your microcosm, you are, doing the best you can. You're inspiring other people. Maybe music's not their thing, but they see somebody who stretches themselves and who really wants to get themselves to the next level, whatever that means. And I just think this obsession with complete perfection, and it has to get 10 out of 10 and is as great as it is because it inspires us and it's what we all, thrive towards, but can sometimes falsely discourage people. Yeah. To not be so obsessed with this, perfection. And now I'm going to sit back and you're going to impress me now. And it better be good. That's not what music is about. And I've seen a lot of live clubs shut down lately. Especially, I used to live in San Francisco, and the live scene was just dismal. They were shutting down left and right. Mm. And because, of course, it has to do with I can sit back in my armchair and pull up on YouTube anybody I want for free. Yeah. I don't even have to leave the house. But man, I just saw Sekou Bunch play last night live, and there is just no substitute from sitting across. And they were doing tunes they had never done, and they were just diving in, taking risks, and there was this human element of just like, I'm at the edge, man. I'm right there at the edge. This is not like about, I just want to see how far I can stretch myself, that sort of spirit. And it was amazing. It was an incredible show. So I think more live interaction is really would be something that's very healing for the audience as much as for the musicians, because there's just no substitute to being in the moment like this. And you get so wrapped up into this moment that is going to be unique only this one time. I can't hit replay if I wanted to. What was that? Let me rewind this, Right. And which is nice too, but it's just a totally different aspect about it. And to me, there's just an honesty about live music that you otherwise don't really have. So I think people going out, creating house concerts, creating a scene, because yes, it costs a lot of money to put on shows. It's a lot of effort to, put together shows, as you know. So yeah. It's whoever can open their doors to music and live shows and live interaction. I think that's a very healing, connecting, beautiful thing.
Yeah, it sure is. I mean, live shows, I think that concept is a great one to think about and emphasize. Really no substitute for live music. And that comment you made about, or what you were talking about, here's a pro, they know how to do it, I don't know how to do it. Mm-hmm. But, I remember at some other music camps I've been to, when somebody who was trying to learn was terrified of getting on stage and playing Freight Train. Yeah. We were all down there just, with them pulling, hoping.
You're rooting for them, right?
And overcoming those little blocks, which they're blocks, but they're not really blocks. They're something else. But I guess encouraging people, even if, they're working on it, come up with a set, go out and do it. I mean, it's what's the worst that can happen?
I've seen this pop up a lot lately. This effort to, even when you teach, to sort of cuddle and cushion and just, I don't want you to have any bad experiences. I just want you to feel safe and it's not a struggle. And I'm not even going to demonstrate something for you because I don't want you to feel bad that you're not as good, and I don't think that that's helpful at all. I think it's rather backfiring. Mm-hmm. I mean, let's be honest, it's not that easy. It's a struggle. We're facing demons. We're staring them down the their throats. There might have been a music teacher or a parent who said something that just cut so deep, right? But we're sitting there staring it down, and just, as you say, going up, mustering up the courage, going up on stage and doing that. And I think that has so much, value, and it's precious to. I think it's a mistake to just say, no, it's all easy. It's all, you got this, you sound great. That's the worst thing you can do. And there's always a next step. And I always want to show people right behind that corner. That's as far as you can see. Might be scary, but you can get there. And then there'll be another corner, that sort of idea.
Yeah, I guess sort of putting it in another context, learning to sort of look at, recognize, see what those fears are, what may happen because of the fears, and then being able to just say, no matter what, we're going out and we're doing it. Those are important lessons that you can get through music that apply in your life.
Yeah, it empowers you, and you go, oh, what else could I potentially do? I just played my first solo. Holy cow, what else could I potentially do? So every time we reach those little milestones, I think it's very important. Of course, we have a proclivity to, beat ourselves up.
Yeah.
So we'll be very ready to do that. But then, it might take a day or two, and then we're back in the shed. And I just think that that's such a beautiful victory. And that's not just something personal between me and I, or you and you. I think that it just radiates out, because we walk a little differently if we do that. We talk a little bit differently when we do that. And when we see somebody else struggle with something, we understand.
Yes.
And we can support them in that way.
Yeah, we don't have to judge them quite the same.
Exactly.
So you've been you've been playing music all your life. We've talked about a lot of very interesting things, but you have a lot of people who listen to what you say. Other things that maybe I didn't ask about, or that you might want to talk about, or other thoughts to leave folks with. This has been a great conversation, and I really, really appreciate it. Still,
well,
go ahead.
Thank you so much, Jefferson, for steering the thoughts in that direction. We're often asked to, talk about, our influences, or our what we learned, or our schooling, but to really pinpoint down these finer aspects of the deeper motivation of music, and the deeper innermost workings that music does to us, is always really inspiring. And I find it a very worthwhile conversation. So I think what you are doing with your podcasts is very precious. My message is, I think, if I have one, is just one of encouragement. And I want to say, I've seen so many students, especially older learners, start. And if you have a good program, if you follow a good systematic approach, it just takes a bit of discipline. It takes an open mind, and it takes courage. It really does take courage to, face down the past, right, and believe in ourselves that we can actually do this, and that it's worthwhile. And I just want to encourage anybody who's thinking about doing music, or who supports people in their lives who are doing music, to just see how precious, fragile, strong, powerful, all of that it is. And I do firmly believe, I'm an eternal optimist. I do believe people have good intentions, and you might not agree with how they phrase them, or who they vote for, or whatever it is they think, but it's so easy to fall into this black and white thinking, especially these days. There's such a divide in this country, and it's really on the surface. I think it's this divide. We are deep down. We want to just have a good life, create some good things, and we need to talk to each other more and listen.
Well, absolutely. Well, you're doing a huge amount to help people learn music, get out there. I guess there's a lot of life lessons intaking music, and hopefully we'll just, keep on keeping on and make that better world that we want to have. So,
Yeah.
Ariane Cap, thank you very much for taking the time. I really, really, really appreciate it. I'm sure we'll connect at some point in the physical world, and look forward to that. And thanks very much, and just really appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. I really appreciate what you are doing, Jefferson, and I wish you all the best. I'll definitely keep an ear out for your podcasts, and looking forward to who else you're going to have on. So very cool. It was an honor to be on your show. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. You've been listening to Planetary Gig Talk, Tales of Music and Magic. I'm your host, Jefferson Glassy, Chief Spiritual Dude of the Planetary Gig Society. We talk with musicians and others about the power of music and how we can use music to help create a better world. Please check out our website, www.planetarygigs.org, for information about some of the organizations promoting music and musicians, resources about the power of music, books, movies, articles, including new research on music and the brain. We welcome your support. The Planetary Gig Society is a Section 501c3 charitable organization, and you can donate on the website. You also can receive a free email signature block demonstrating your support for Planetary Gig Society. Please follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Planetary Gigs. And we want to thank fabulous musician and teacher Eric Weinberg of Little Eric Studios for the Planetary Gig Talk music titled Chill Kid, It's Saul. So please check out Planetary Gig Talk on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. Subscribe and hear all the upcoming episodes. Thanks very much.